class on how to fill out the forms. This is how to sell the value of signing a buyer-broker agreement with you. So a couple of things about me. I've been a broker for over 40 years. I'm the author of 9 books, some of which you see up here. Spoken at 14 NAR conventions on this topic for over a decade. And so it's appropriate. I've been using this form, the buyer broker, now called the buyer representation agreement, since about 1980. So for me, and for some of you out there, including Dimitri and a few others, this is not a big change. But for some of us, it's going to be. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. But a couple of caveats before we start. Number one, any number I throw out here is going to be for illustration purposes only. All compensation, as you know, is negotiable between the broker and the client. There's no such thing, and never has been, anything called a standard commission. You can charge something in your office if you wish, and your broker can say, we're charging X, but that's not an industry-wide, never has been, but we'll talk about that. But charge what you're worth, and that's what I'm here to help you do today, is to sell your value to your clients. Unfortunately, NAR and CAR have never done a very good job at showing people our value. Because sellers in America think we do what to earn our money? Sign on the lawn and ad on the internet, right? And it magically sells and closes itself. Buyers still believe that what do we do to earn our money? We open doors. That's it. In the old days, we used to drive them around and then open doors. Now we don't even do that. All right. And so that's what they believe. And so ever, they've always challenged our compensation. It's going to be worse. Okay, so we really need to sell our value. And if you prove your worth, they will pay it. And I'll show you how I've done that for 40 years. But just a quick overview of how did we get here today. 2019, there was a gentleman named Joshua Sitzer who filed a lawsuit against NAR and his brokers. And he complained that the sharing of compensation between the listing broker and the buying broker, basically was antitrust. He was paying people to negotiate against his interest. And you could see how he could make that argument. And you could see how a judge and jury, knowing what they know about real estate, which is nothing, could agree with him. Okay, but that's how we got here. And again, he alleged violations of the Sherman Antitrust Act. And this is a Missouri case. And again, the Sherman Antitrust Act goes all the way back to 1890. It was originally about railroads competing against each other or fixing prices so the prices wouldn't go down, but it goes all the way back to 1890. So you'll hear a lot about antitrust when your clients who are beginning to find out about this, they start talking to you about it. So there is something you got to understand called the NAR Cooperative Compensation Rule. It's been in place since the founding of the Multiple Listing Service. So what it said was the listing broker had to offer compensation to the selling broker in order to put a listing in the MLS. And we all know that. We've all done it. And again, if you want to know, it's Article 3, Standard of Practice 3.2 of the NAR Code, which will be changing. But just to let you know, it said that you had to make a blanket unilateral offer of compensation to other MLS participants. That is called the Cooperative Compensation Rule. This is changing because of the Sitzer case, which, as you know, NAR lost. And again, this took place in the listing agreement where you had to fill out the box that said you're providing X% or you're going to give a particular price or a compensation to the agent who brings the buyer. And as you may know, 86% of sellers last year listed their properties in the MLS. And so they all followed this cooperative compensation rule. However, on October 6th of 2023, our world changed. NAR said all of a sudden, because they could see the handwriting on the wall, that listing agents can offer zero compensation to the agent for the buyer. And almost immediately, some sellers began to do this. I saw it happening in Texas and a few other places. But again, NAR said that no more, you didn't have to offer compensation to the agent for the buyer. And so this is the biggest change in the history of organized real estate. Now, again, this court ruled that NAR conspired to have home sellers pay the broker representing the buyer of their homes in violation of federal antitrust law. And there's that word antitrust again. But this is not just a foreign Missouri case. Just recently, a California home seller in Marin County who paid $50,000 in commission also filed a lawsuit. And there's hundreds of copycat lawsuits against NAR and various real estate brokers all across the country. And so this is not just elsewhere. This affects us as well, as you know. So just to give you a sense of what the consumer is seeing today, here's what they see in the headlines. Realtor Group settlement kills 6% real estate commission on house sales. Where did the 6% come from? That's what consumers believe realtors make. Every one of us personally on every home sale. And this is important to understand so you understand why there is such anger against realtors. People hate realtors because they think we make too much money and we don't earn it. And that's just a fact of life. Is the 6% commission dead? Realtors Group settles lawsuit over home sale fees. This will blow up the market. 6% commission on buying, selling. This is just from yesterday. These are the headlines I pulled from yesterday. And on and on. Notice it all says 6%, other than the bottom one, which says Realtors Group ends commission model, biggest jolt in housing in 100 years, which it is. But again, that's what your clients are seeing. Okay, so it's just important to understand from their perspective so that you can understand how and what they are thinking today. All right, so and here's a couple of things that the New York Times said Americans have long paid unusually high commissions to real estate agents. Typical commission in the US has been almost 6%. Compared with 4.5% in Germany, 2.5% in Australia, 1.3% in Britain. They don't talk about whether that's, to the listing agent, cooperatively, nothing. There's no context to any of the information that's out there. I come from a journalistic background. I worked for ABC Television for many years when I first came out of college. I know that journalism is worse today than it ever has been. And this is the kind of stuff you see. And then they said the settlement is important in its own rights. Americans now spend $100 million a year on commissions, which is true. That number will probably decline by between, about 20 billion and 50 billion. So somewhere between a third and a half, they believe that this is going to save the consumer, which I doubt very much, but we'll see. All right, so you need to sell your value to buyers and sellers today, because sellers are seeing these headlines and they're saying, well, I'm not paying 3% anymore, or I'm not paying 6% anymore. Why should I pay that when this is going on? So today, sellers paying the buyer's broker is optional. As you know, NAR eliminated that back in October of last year. Buyers may have to pay for their own agent if the seller is not compensating to the level that you're comfortable. Commission to the buyer's broker must be made public. And if you've ever looked at Redfin, you notice there's a buyer's agent fee that's listed on Redfin. Now, this is today, this is changing, but I just want to show you where are we today. And we can only practice our profession as it is today, not based on what might possibly happen. So, but please, I'm not your broker. Please consult your own broker on how they want you to deal with all of this. But this is just what is going on. And sellers paying the buyer's broker may be outlawed. I don't know. I hope not, but we'll see. So that's just a fact of life today. All right. Now, what's happening? NAR, as you know, proposed, this is not a done deal yet. Everybody is, all the headlines, Realtor settled this. They haven't settled anything yet. They have proposed changes scheduled to go into effect on July 17th of next year, or this year, sorry. But in about 6 months, a little less than that, these are the proposed changes from NAR. Now, the court has to accept it, and the Department of Justice must agree. And the Department of Justice is really lately very anti-Realtor Commission. And just a fact of life. So here are the changes. Number one, no offers of buyer's agent compensation to be on the MLS. So I'll show you a spot where they usually go, right? Where the selling agent commission goes. That's no longer going to be there if this is all agreed to and NAR makes these changes. Now, there's going to be a million questions about this. No one knows where this is going. Can we put them in the confidential remarks? Do I have to call every agent whose property my client is interested in? Nobody knows just yet. But at the moment, we're still putting, it's still being displayed in the MLS. So, just stay in touch with your board and your broker. Number two, agents must have written agreement of compensation with their buyers. Must have. Used to be optional. I did it. Most agents did not do it. I just got really tired of my clients. I spent 6 months with them. Then you go and buy with Uncle Bob, who's a part-time realtor out of the area, right? But I got tired of that right away, and I discovered the buyer-broker agreement. But 19 other states currently require that there be a written agreement of compensation with buyers. We're likely to be one of the next. So this is definitely coming. NAR is going to pay $418 million over 4 years to settle their lawsuits, which, if you're a member of NAR, should hopefully absolve you of liability for any of these lawsuits. And NAR continues to deny any wrongdoing, just to let you know. It's pretty common that someone will pay a great deal of money and then be able to say, I didn't do anything wrong. Then why did you pay the money? You know how that is. All right, so stay tuned. This is all in flux, but we can only practice what we know today. That's it. So I'm moving forward with listings, with buyers. Still having them sign a buyer broker agreement. The form is going to be changed shortly. What do we do if I've got a listing and a buyer walks into my listing, which happens all the time? Do I have to have them, every one of them sign a buyer representation agreement? I don't know. It's a ton of paperwork because I don't know about you, but when I do open houses, I price them kind of at the low end. I stage them. They look fabulous on the internet. So we get 70 to 100 people a day through an open house. I mean, am I going to have to do that? I don't know yet, but we'll see. But those are the questions I'm sure you're thinking about and I'm thinking about as well. So there are several different ways that buyer's agents can be compensated, and none of them are unusual. Number one, there's a fixed fee commission paid directly by the buyer. Could be a percentage, could be a dollar amount, whatever. There could be a concession from the seller. My sellers still believe that they offer something to the agent for the buyer, more buyers will show their property and they might get a better price. But that's up to them. But that's my argument to them to at least encourage them to compensate the buyer's agent to some degree. You can get a commission from a portion of the listing broker's compensation. And again, you've got to now get permission to do that, but we have forms for that. And we've had forms for that. That isn't exactly new. But you've got to be a world-class negotiator these days to get whatever commission you want from the seller and to be compensated appropriately from the buyer. I've written a book on this if you're interested, see me, but you've got to be a great negotiator these days. Not even just a good negotiator. You're going to have to be really, really good. All right, so why do you want to work with buyers in the first place now? Well, first of all, they're easier to get. You can shake a stick and run into a buyer. Not so easy to find sellers, right? But they're everywhere. Number two, they're easier to find and they're a good source of referrals. Because my sellers, when they leave, I don't know about you, but when they sell their homes up a little further north in the Bay Area where I am, they're going to South Carolina, they're going to Vegas, they're going to God knows where. I won't see them again. And so the chances of me getting a referral from them are slim to none. But my buyers are still here. And guess what? They're still talking to other buyers. So great source of referrals. I love my buyers. Some buyers, though, aren't ready or serious. And right now, you cannot waste your time with buyers that aren't serious, because the only thing you sell is your time and your money and your knowledge, okay? Because you're spending money, you're spending time, and you're giving away your knowledge. So please recognize that. You want to work with buyers that are serious. So I don't want to work, how about you, with buyers that aren't qualified? What's the best way to know if your buyers are qualified? Get them pre-approved. If they won't sit down with a lender on the most important purchase of their life, how serious are they? And what does it cost to get pre-approved? Nothing. All right. So minimum pre-approval. I'd like mine to be fully desk underwritten, because then I can make offers as if it were cash, unless they go out and buy a car or a boat. But other than that, it's a pretty much guaranteed loan. I don't want people that aren't serious. I mean, if they have a definite deadline and a reason for buying, I'm there. But if they're just thinking about it, I'll stay in touch, but I don't think I want to waste my time. But this is a challenging one, but you better think about this. Compatible. I don't believe in building rapport. I mean, either you have it or you don't, right? You meet somebody at a party, you talk with them for 10 minutes, you just keep talking and talking. I mean, you could go on for hours. And there's other people, you could talk to them for about 2 minutes, and after, you talk about sports and you've run out of sports knowledge, that's it. You got to think about that, because people that are compatible with you are more likely to be loyal. They're more likely to sign a buyer representation agreement. Okay? And it's the opposite with people that are not compatible. So, for example, no disrespect to any profession, especially here in Silicon Valley, but I don't get along well with engineers. They are just too analytical for me. They don't want to know about square footage. They want to know about square inchage, right? I'm not that kind. I mean, if it meets your needs, it meets your needs. I work with people in the helping profession like nurses and teachers and doctors and people like that who appreciate what I do for them. But yeah, they've got to be pre-approved, right? But if I run into engineering clients, I refer them to engineering agents that were former engineers, and they get along just fabulously. And I get a referral fee agreement just in case. You never know. But compatible. Lawsuit prone. If you ask your client, where'd you get the money? And they say, well, I sued some realtor. You may not want to work with them. It's your choice. And people that aren't loyal. And all I can tell you is, if they won't sign a buyer representation agreement, there's your first sign. Okay? All right. So we talked about this. What do buyers think of agents? They think we're sort of a necessary evil, but emphasis on evil. Okay? They just don't think we earn our money. They think we make an incredible amount of money and don't earn it. And the only other people that make an incredible amount of money and don't earn it generally have to wear a mask to do their job. They think all we do is open doors these days. That's it. Now, they think they can find all the listings on Zillow, Redfin, Realtor.com. And if that's the case, maybe we don't deserve what we get. So why would they work with you? Why would they trust you? First thing you got to be able to do is find properties that are not on the MLS. Otherwise, they think they don't need you. How do you find properties not on the MLS? What? Yeah, colleagues, people in the office, right? Where else can you find properties not on the MLS? You what?
Generate your own.
Yeah, of course you can generate your own, right? Your own things that are coming up. What else? There's tons of FSBO websites and things like that. Coming soons don't show to the public, so you have those. And you better start going to your local marketing meetings, because what's an integral part of every marketing meeting? Coming soons, needs and wants, right? And so I go to the marketing, there's 4 of them in my area, but I go to the marketing meeting, I keep an ear to the ground. If somebody's got a listing coming up, they're still staging, they're still doing a little painting, they're doing landscaping, it's not ready yet, but if it meets my client's criteria, I'm going to contact that agent. And very often they'll get me in early, right? And I make a note of it. This is not on the MLS. There's another thing I do that you probably don't do. I subscribe to real estate photography newsletters. So this one in my area, they send one out every 2 weeks. There's 20 to 40 different properties that they've shot. They ain't on the MLS yet. They're not ready. They don't even have flyers yet. But if there's something that meets my client's needs, I'll contact the agent, see if I can get him in. There's plenty of other ways to get properties that are not on the MLS, but never let them believe that everything's on the MLS because they're going to think they don't need you. What else do you do for them? I don't know about you, but I make a big deal about the inspections. I tell them I'm not an inspector. However, I printed out, this is one transaction. All the inspections from this one house that I sold. And I just used this as a sample. I took out the names and all that other stuff. But how much of this do you not want me to go through? I'm not an inspector, but if there's questions that I can't answer, I'm going to refer you to the inspector themselves. But if you want to cut my fee, I'm going to have to cut out some of the things that I do. So maybe you want to go through the inspections by yourself. And you know what happens? They go through this, their eyes glaze over, forget it, right? I mean, but this is some of the things that we do to earn our money. But how many of us ever sit down with a buyer and explain that to them? So value, value, value. So again, I show them from Disclosures.io, what are the disclosures available? And I tell them that if you work with me, I will spend a minimum of 90 minutes going through the disclosures with you, the major disclosures, to educate you. I mean, if you can do it in less than 90 minutes, you're better than me. But it takes a good long while to go through these. And I also tell them that if you are exclusive with me, that I will also go through the purchase agreement, which is about 40 pages long, including the buyer representation agreement. But it's important that they understand that. And I tell them I'm not the kind of agent that just says, trust me, sign here. I want you to understand the whole thing. So from the very beginning, value, value, value. So when you do a listing presentation, how long do you normally spend with a seller? On average, give me a number. How long do you spend on a listing presentation? 2 hours? 2 hours, hour and a half, 2.5 hours. I mean, I've had cake and cookies, and I mean, it goes on and on and on. How long do you spend with buyers before you ever throw them in your car or meet them at a property? Because who's more likely to waste your time, a buyer or a seller? Shouldn't you spend at least as much time with a buyer before you start showing property as you do with a seller? So think about that. It's very important to have a whole presentation, what I call the buyer counseling session, before you ever start working with a buyer. So number one thing I do is I explain how I earn my money. Because they think we do what? Nothing, right? Nothing. So I made a list of activities. This took me months. Every time I did something for a buyer, I wrote it down on a slip of paper, threw it in my glove box. Every Saturday morning, I put it into the computer and I made a list. Because again, they think we do nothing. I give them this big, thick guide called my buyer's guide. And it talks about how do you go from looking at a house to owning one? Who are all the people involved? But the most important thing in it is this: my list of things I do for buyers. And it goes on and on and on and on for about 150 items. Now, I don't read every one of them to them, but I do basically flip through the pages so they can see that, like them, I work hard for my money. And I would never go to their place of work and ask for part of their paycheck. They should never come and ask me for part of mine. And I'm old school. I like to print this out because here's how it looks. These are some of the things that I do for my buyers. When I'm not with you and I'm not opening doors, once we're in contract, there's a lot of things I need to do to make sure that you get the home of your dreams and that it actually closes, right? So if you don't want to pay me what I'm worth, pick a few of these that you'd be willing to do yourself instead of me, because every one of these takes me time. And then we could talk about cutting my fee. Never had a buyer say to me, yeah, 124, 183, no. They always look at this, their eyes glaze over and they say, no, 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 you're the realtor, you do those things. And my answer to them is, if you want me to do what I believe it takes to get you the home of your dreams at the price you can afford, and to make sure that it is in sound condition, these are what I need to do. If you want to pay less, I'll find you an agent who does less, and maybe they can save you some money. Again, value, 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 constantly. Because they think once we're gone, or once we've opened the door, we're done. No, you know better, but they don't. Same thing for sellers. And sellers are going to begin to really hammer your commission now that they're seeing all of this stuff about how commissions are coming down. You see all of that, right? And you're just beginning to see the early part of it. Hasn't really spread widely yet, but you're going to see it. And so I explain to them that I work really hard for my money when I'm listing a home. And again, there's a different list of things that I do to earn my money. And it's not just putting a sign on the lawn and an ad on the internet. There's all of this stuff that I've got to do for them. Now, does the list work? Oh, yeah. Let me just show you a sample of some of my listings. Now, you know that comp selling office here is the compensation to the agent who brings the buyer. Now, again, I'm just throwing a number out there. I list for 6% or higher. So you can see, because of my list, people think I'm worth it. And they'll think you're worth it too if you give them at least a list of what you do. But it's not just on, it's on townhomes, it's on single family, 1-story, 2-story, large properties, 2 million. It doesn't matter. Condominiums, it doesn't matter. Okay, same commission is what I get because I can sell my value. You don't need my list. You can make one up yourself, but if you want to save some time, it's available to you. You have an order form. If you're on Zoom, basically just email me and I can get it to you, michaelsoonlee@gmail.com. But it not only has the list for sellers, the list for buyers, a whole presentation. It also has an expired listing guide and one for sale by owners, because there's probably going to be more of them now because they think commissions are dropping down. But if you're interested, you have an order form. The other thing, besides how hard you work, you've got to explain how much you make. Because here's what they believe. And again, forget reality. They think we make 6%, right? You've seen it, headline after headline after headline. And that number just didn't come out of thin air. That's what people have believed since the beginning of organized real estate. 6%. So here's what they believe. On an $800,000 home in California, and here it's much higher, but use whatever number applies to you. They believe we make 6%, which means they believe we make $48,000 on every house we sell. And they know we don't sell one house a year or one house a month. The average person believes we sell 2 houses a month. So they believe we make $96,000 a month. Every one of us in our pockets, net, net, net. And then, of course, they always do this. Oh, wait a minute, $96,000 a month. There's 12 months in the year. That's $1,152,000. To do what? Nothing. Right? Do you understand why they're trying to cut your commission? Buyers want a rebate because they think we don't earn it. Some buyers want a rebate, right? And I don't know about you, but in my area, they all want 1%. But what are they really asking for? They think they want one of the 6% that they think you get. Which actually, if that were true, wouldn't be so bad because it's only 16.7%. But that's not what we make. Most agents make about 2.5% gross. So 1% of that is 40% of your income. When I explain to my clients, you're asking for half of my income, they go, oh, no, I don't want half. If they want it all, refer them to your worst enemy, right? And get a referral fee agreement just in case. But no, most of my clients, they go, well, no, I don't want half. And I say to them, well, let's be serious. Do you want a couple of $1,000s? Or do you want me to protect you fully on the most important purchase or sale of your life? And generally the answer is no, forget I asked. If they still do, I'm referring them to you, okay? But it's rare, Once they understand, I mean, they appreciate hard work. They work hard. They just don't think we do. That's the problem. We have failed. So you've got to educate your clients. So what I do is I give them this in my booklets. I make them little pie charts and I explain how the compensation is split because they don't get it. 6%, that's all they know. And that's all they're gonna know because of all of these articles that are coming out. You have got to educate. NAR ain't gonna do it. CAR ain't gonna do it. It's you with your clients and me with my clients, one client at a time. That's all we can do. These big billboards, the realtors earn their money, ain't gonna do any good. Okay? Did you have a question?
Yeah, so everything that you're talking about, I guess, is in your booklets that you.
Yes.
After sale, which is good because I went to a presentation one time where this guy wanted like $1,000 a month or something like that, to help you with all.
I wish I could do the $1,000 a month coaching, but
I'm not gonna say the name, but maybe some.
everybody, there's several of them out there. No, I mean, what you get from me is you get hard copy as a reference, and then you get it electronically as well, so that you can put your own picture on it, your client's picture in it, what you can add, you can subtract from the list, whatever you want. Okay, it's pretty easy. All right, so please explain the split. And I hope you understand the split too, because you might be surprised. So I explained to them, especially now, that there's a listing broker and there's a selling broker. Now let's just take one side of it. Let's say I'm working with you as a buyer. My broker could get 2.5 or 3% or less. It depends. But let's just go with what people believe, which is 3%, right? But of the 3% my broker gets, we sometimes forget this. I pay my broker to be with the company. It's called a broker split, a desk fee, whatever they want to call it, but they're taking a piece of your hide, right? So me, your agent, I'm down to that. But wait a minute. Me, your agent, I have expenses, board dues, MLS, E&O insurance, printing costs, car expenses, you name it, goes on and on and on. But me, your agent, after expenses, I'm down to that. But wait, we're in the highest tax bracket in America as realtors. We all pay about a 28% federal, 10 or 12% California tax. But in addition to that, unlike your clients, we pay something called the self-employment tax. Because if you're working for Apple or Google, they're paying for most of your employment tax. So our total tax after expenses is over 50%. I mean, the good news is if you're taking a class like this, half of it's being paid by Uncle Sam. Or if you spend $100 on a book or educational products, it's $50 after tax. Well, that's the good news. The bad news is half of our net income goes to taxes. So me, your agent, after all expenses, I'm down to that after tax. 1/2 of 1%, and that assumes you're getting 3%. So I get 1/2 of 1% to feed my family, put our kids through school, and keep a roof over our heads. That's it. Well, yeah, I mean, there's, you name it. There's car insurance, E&O insurance. I mean, on and on it goes. But after that, we have to take the taxes out. So on that $800,000 average price that they thought we were making $48,000 on, we have $4,000 net to feed our families and keep a roof over their heads. So how much of that do you, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer or seller, do you now want? For us to do 150 things or more on your behalf. But you see why you have to contextualize this for them. And again, nobody else is going to do this, just us. All right, so where do you find buyers? They're everywhere. And they're going to be coming out of the woodwork. Because everybody wants to own a home. Hopefully rates will come down. I don't know. We'll know in the next day or two. But we're not going to see 3% anymore. Anybody around in 1980? You and I were around. What were the interest rates in 1980? Try 21%. Okay, so 7% to me doesn't seem so bad. But if we can get her down to 6, 5.5, somewhere in that range is where I think it's going to settle over the next 2 years or so. I mean, we're going to see lots more buyers coming out of the woodwork. You're going to see more sellers, but you're going to see more competition. You're going to see multiple offers. But you got renters, you've got open houses, still going to be a great way to go. How we're going to handle the buyer rep agreement at the open house, I don't know yet. Well, we'll figure it out. Right, we've been through this before. Many of us have been in the business a long time. We've seen a lot of challenges. We just figure a way. Referrals from satisfied customers, get a lot of those. Online leads, I paid $2,500 a month to get leads from Zillow. And I wouldn't have done it if it didn't make sense. And you've got plenty of other sources to get buyers. But if you can't think of any other ways, I wrote a little book called 111 Lead Generation Techniques. Most of them are free or $20. But I don't know, I wouldn't be, if I were looking for listings, I wouldn't be knocking on doors today. I was talking to an agent, he's thinking about coaching with me, and he said, well, I knock on doors. I said, well, that's good, but what's your return on investment? Not good. And if you're a minority like me, I don't think I'd be knocking on doors. It's a little dangerous out there. All right. So the counseling session, let me just give you kind of an overview of what my counseling session looks like during the break here. You can look at my buyer's guide. You can look at my seller's guide. You can see kind of what I do. But the goal of my buyer's counseling session, my guide, is to get them to sign the buyer broker agreement. That's the whole goal. Just like when you work with a seller, the goal of a listing presentation is to get the listing signed before you leave the door. Because the chances of them, if you leave ever signing it, are slim to none. All right. So when do you want to do your buyer counseling session? You want to do it before you ever show a property. Now, this may change, who knows, but I'm guessing this won't change. Yes. Oh, I understand. And it'll be up to us in our own offices to decide what to do when whatever NAR decides to do, whatever CAR decides to do. But again, it's within your own brokerage is what you need to be concerned about. Yeah, one more and we got to move on. No, I'm using the CAR form, not some proprietary agreement, because it works. I mean, it's pretty much backed by CAR if there's a problem, but there's other forms out there that are a lot simpler and a lot cleaner. Now, I'm hoping that the new buyer rep agreement, which is due in a couple of weeks, will be a lot easier, but we'll see. But basically what you want them to do is to be committed to you, understand what they owe you and how it's going to get paid. And that's what the CAR form does. But if you show property without having a buyer representation agreement signed, is there a problem? What? They can go around you. Yeah. Okay, what's the highest duty under the law for a realtor? Highest duty. It's called agency, right? So my question to you is, if you show property without having them sign a buyer rep agreement, have you created agency? All right, so you got to commit. How many people say no agency created? Couple people, okay, and everybody else is saying yeah. The challenge is, and the reason you're so wishy-washy about this is because you're not quite clear on what agency is. I mean, if I'm at a party and we're just chatting, we're having a drink, we're getting along, and she says to me, what do you think's going on with this new commission thing? And I explain it to her, and she says, well, I'm thinking about, buying a home, and, what do you think the market's going to do? What are the rates going on? And in Almaden, what do you think the prices are going to do? And we just chat, have I created agency? Okay, commit. How many people say, yeah, I created agency? Okay, so you need to write this down. This is a very simple definition of agency, but you need to know it because do you need to know when you're creating the highest duty under the law? Absolutely. All right, so here it is. I'll repeat it a couple of times, so don't break your wrist trying to write it down. Acts on behalf of a client, ACTS, acts on behalf of a client with third parties. Acts on behalf of a client with third parties. Do we have any attorneys in the room? No, not today. Well, I mean, that's a pretty, is it okay? Is it an okay definition? Yeah. So if I'm at a party, have I created agency? No, why not? No third party. If I go to a property, meet the client there, go to the lockbox, open it up, open the door, close the door after we're done, I never see them again, have I created agency? Who's the third party? The seller, the other agent, the listing agent, right? So does that help? So when do you want to give this presentation? Before you show property, because the law says, the law of agency says, before you show property, you must do what? You must provide an agency disclosure, right? There's no commitment. It just explains how am I showing this, on behalf of who am I showing this property? And they got to sign it. Oh, and by the way, the property you showed them was listed by an agent in your office. And if you didn't do the buyer broker agreement, what did you just now do? Undisclosed dual agency, right? So you got to do this before you ever show property. So just like a listing agreement, sit them down, explain what it is. And if they won't sign it after they understand it, you don't show them any property, and hallelujah. Because you spent 90 minutes, but not 6 months. Because if they won't sign it after they understand it, what does that mean? They're not going to be loyal to you. So does that help? Okay, we're going to, before we move on loyalty and all of that, we're going to just take 10 minutes as a break because I know you guys got to make phone calls and texts and everything else. If you want to look at anything I've got up here, feel free. I'll be happy to answer our other questions. So take 10. All righty, welcome back. Oh my God, good to see you. I'm so glad this.
We gotta catch up when you're done.
All right, look forward to it. What are you doing down here? I gotta find, I'm behind, I'm way behind. All righty. So are we clear that we need to give the buyer counseling session before you show property.
Yep.
Does anybody have any questions? Because I think it's pretty clear you've got to do that, especially now. So obviously, I'm going to run you through kind of a quick overview of how my buyer's counseling session works. Bill rapport, you know how to do that. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but I like to ask a logical list of questions. And that could be as simple as how long you've been looking. What's your deadline? They don't have a deadline for buying. I don't know, you know. Because my definition of a deadline is the soonest you will ever do anything. Why are you buying? Have you previously made offers? If you've been looking for 6 months and never made an offer, what are the chances they're going to make an offer with you? Slim to none, right? And then any other questions? Again, they love this because this is all about them. But it's an educational session. I'm here to learn about you, and I'm here to help you understand about the real estate business. Do it before you show property. Remember, we talked about that. But I like to talk about how do you end up owning a home? A lot of people, they know about the looking part. They don't know about how do you end up owning it. And that's where we earn our money. I think educated buyers are better buyers. They appreciate what you do. They're more loyal. On it goes. Again, I explain, how do I earn my money? I explain agency, the highest duty under the law, honesty, fair dealing, putting their interests ahead of yours. And I even show them the agency form because we have to anyways. And it explains there's the seller's agent, there's the buyer's agent. There's also dual agency. They've got to understand that. And they have responsibilities like we have responsibilities. And then they sign it. When they sign it, they're committing themselves to what? Nothing. They're just saying, I got a copy. That's it, right? That's nothing. So I like to talk about the advantages of home ownership. The fact that you can put 5% down, 20% down, and control the whole property. There's some tax benefits, possibly. They've really reduced these down over the years. But please talk to your accountant, but there can be some tax benefits. But for sure, there's equity buildup. Every payment you make contains some principal and a whole lot of interest at the beginning and then the opposite towards the end. But every payment, you're building equity. But unlike other agents, I like to talk about the disadvantages of home ownership. Because I'm not a salesperson, I am your real estate consultant. So I talk about the fact that if you don't plan to stay at least 3 to 5 years, you're probably better off not buying a home. If you like the flexibility of renting, if you don't need the tax benefits, if you don't believe in property ownership, or you think property values are going to decline, or you don't want to lock up your equity as a down payment, don't buy a home. Do you need an agent when buying a new home? I explain to them, who do you think the people in those beautiful models work for? It's the builder, right? And so I'm on your side when you're buying a new home. I can help negotiate things like upgrades, lot premiums, and I've even done inspections on new homes and found problems. But the builder isn't going to do that. What's the multiple listing system? Now, this could change, but it's going to be similar. Showing property. I mean, I set up my showing schedule so it's in a logical loop all the way back to where we started, saves them time. But when do you want to see property? Now, I don't think my skills are best used as an Uber driver. I don't know about you, but I very often have a teammate show them the property, and then I'm best used writing a contract that'll stick, dealing with multiple offer situations, doing the disclosures. That's where I'm best used. But I explain that during this part. Work whatever way you want to do this profession, go for it. But that's when we talk about how do we show property. Then I talk about the purchase agreement. And I do a very high level view of the purchase agreement. I explain to them that if we decide we're going to work together, and that if I'm the agent that you would like to work with, we're going to spend much more time on it. But I explain the high level. Here's where the purchase price goes and the financing. Here are the inspections. There are 9 different areas of contingency possible. And that's pretty much it. But I mean, 27 pages just to start. They get a sense that they're not really wanting to do this themselves. They need help. Financing. Talk about financing. Most people think there's only one kind of loan, 20% down, fixed rate, 30-year. There's hundreds of different loan programs. One might be the best for you. So we talk about just how do we come up with the best financing plan for you? And the fact that you might have a lender. Everybody knows a lender like everybody knows 3 realtors. But I explained to them that you might want to shop around a little bit. Talk about the showing schedule. When are you available to look? And that'll determine which of my team members they'll work with too. Go ahead. Should you recommend lenders? That's really up to you. I recommend at least 3, right? Not just 1. I talk about my team, that I'm not just the only one involved in this. There's a lot of people that I help to coordinate. Again, value, value, value. There's the listing agent that I've got to deal with. Especially in multiple offer, this is crucial. I am your selling agent. Here are the things that I do. But there's also a lender that you're going to decide on that I'll work with and coordinate all of the disclosures and everything else. There's an appraiser who's kind of important. There are inspectors. So we're going to talk about the inspections on every property. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to send you the inspections for you to look at. You may not want to make an offer after you see the inspections. There's an escrow company. I explain how escrow works. There's a transaction coordinator. Once we're in escrow, you're going to be getting documents to sign from my transaction coordinator. And you may want to talk to your financial tax advisor, or maybe even a trust attorney, because when you buy a home, it affects your tax plan, your financial plan, and your estate plan. Then we spend some time doing a thorough wants and needs analysis. Because the difference between wants and needs, wants something that you just would be nice to have, and a need is something you've got to have. And I believe that it helps to avoid this thing called buyers are liars syndrome, because I don't believe that buyers want to meet you for 6 months at dozens of different properties and then buy something totally different. I think the problem is we didn't do a thorough wants and needs analysis to really parse out exactly what are they looking for. So, I mean, your wants may be 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, 3,000 square feet in San Ramon, top school district, pool, view, workshop. Great, dream on. But we may narrow that down once we talk to your lender. But I asked them, if I could find you the home of your dreams, but it only had 3 bedrooms, would you buy it? And if the answer is, well, if it had some space to use as an office, it'd be okay. So 4 bedrooms was a want, 3 is a need. Same thing with the bathrooms, the square footage, the area, the district, the pool, whatever. So this goes into my search parameters in the MLS. And if I can get them any of the other wants, it's a bonus. It works great. But they love this because this, again, is all about what do they want in a home. This is about them. So what is the buyer representation agreement? Some of you may have never seen one. It's just a listing agreement with the buyer. You've done lots of listing agreements, maybe never used the buyer rep agreement, but that's all it is. It's not new. It's been around since the beginning of organized real estate. Most often used with commercial, but back in 1978 or 79, when my clients that I spent 6 months with went and bought with Uncle Bob, I asked my broker, I said, what can I do about this? And he said, well, there's some form I saw one time that you might look at called the buyer broker agreement. And I looked at it and I said, this is great. Why don't we use this? And he said, well, because buyers won't sign it. So I started using it, and guess what I discovered? Buyers will sign it. Now they're going to have to sign with somebody. Because I firmly believe, probably in 6 months to a year, California will enact a law that says buyers must have a signed agreement with an agent before looking at property. I mean, it's a common, you can see it. There are tons of benefits to the agent. This is why I've been using it for 45 years plus. Reduces legal liability because it's more transparent. It says, how much would I like to get paid and who's paying me? And that's the word you're going to hear constantly: transparent, transparent, transparent. The beauty, and I love this, buyers can look on their own. I have sold 2 properties while I was on a cruise 5 weeks in Southeast Asia. Because they looked at it, they said, you know, we like it. Can you write an offer? It was tough in Vietnam because when you're in a communist country, they slow the internet down. It was, I had to have one of my teammates write it, send it out. We all signed it. I got it in, but you need to have a good team around you because you need time off. Is this business difficult? Is it stressful? You need to be taking time off. And the reason most realtors don't take time off, they're afraid to lose business. What I've always found, always, and how many people have found this? When you're about to go away on vacation, all of a sudden, stuff comes up, listings and buyers and stuff. Go away. Jeez. So, but have a good team that can handle whatever, you need. And then when you're here, you'll handle for them. But it allows buyers to look on their own. I sold one property while I was on vacation, closed it, never saw it. Still haven't seen it. Not the inside. I've seen the outside. I had a teammate do the Avid and everything else, but never saw it. Isn't that great? Is that efficient? Now, I did build all the trust. I did the buyer presentation. We did look at a few houses before I left, but they couldn't find one. There's no such problem as procuring cause. Oh, I wrote the offer. Well, I showed the property. Well, I want a piece of your commission. None of that because you have a listing agreement with your buyer. The only problem is you've got to be able to sell it to the buyer. And that's the challenge. So we're going to talk a little bit about how do you sell this? So what is the buyer representation agreement? Well, here's one of the reasons that I can get a buyer to sign it. You might want to take a picture, write it down, whatever. Without a buyer broker agreement or a buyer rep agreement, agents won't show you all the property in the price range and in the area you want to buy. A lot of you are looking at me like, that's not true. What properties will agents not show if you don't have a buyer representation agreement?
Less than 2%.
Maybe it's a property that offers less commission than they would want to operate their business. And everybody decides that on their own, how much that is. What other properties will you not show if you don't have a buyer rep agreement? You're working with them, but you don't have the agreement signed. You're driving down the street, going through Almaden, and you see one of those Home Depot for sale by owner signs. Are you going to show that? Because you're guaranteed what commission? Nothing. New homes, are you sure that every builder will cooperate? No. No. So there's a huge benefit to the buyer to signing a buyer representation agreement. But they can also trust you because you have this agency responsibility to them. The relationship, highest duty under the law, like that of an attorney to their client. Again, they can look at properties on their own. They don't want you tagging along all the time with them. And then, they may just see something and then want to drop in. Maybe it's an open house or something else. They don't want to have to call you and drag you on over. Because my clients appreciate what I do, they're very hesitant to have me go out and show property. If it's going to be open, they look for open houses. Unless it just isn't going to be open, then they'll say, oh, we're so sorry to have to ask you to do this, but could you meet us at this property, open it up and tell us what you think? That's where you want your clients to be, appreciating your value. And again, you will show them everything. FSBOs, new homes, pocket listings, everything. in case you wanted to take a quick picture.
Just-
That's the beauty of the buyer rep agreement. And this worked before it was required. Now that it's going to be required, it'll work even better. But there's all these other forms that can go along with it. And again, these are probably going to change at least in the next couple of weeks. Because I know CAR is madly working on the different forms and tweaking them. But always be sure you've got the most current form because they are going to change weekly or monthly. So check with CAR always what's the most current form. So again, you need to be a world-class negotiator with buyers as well as sellers. But hopefully towards the end of your presentation, they should want to sign the buyer representation agreement with you. So now, how do we negotiate our compensation, though? That's the big issue these days. So in the past, very often, agents would say, look, the seller is paying the commission, so when I'm working with you as a buyer, my services are free to you. You cannot say that anymore because basically what the lawsuit was about is that in order to cover the commission for both parties, what did the seller do? They raised the price, so the buyer's really paying for it in an inflated price over 30 years. So please, 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 never say your services are free unless they truly are. When would your services be truly free? You can't even think of it. Yeah, I suppose, Dimitri.
When you meet with them, the initial meeting, you're not charging them.
Well, if you have a friend or relative that you're trying to help out and you're taking no compensation for your services, then they truly are free. But for most clients, your services are not free. Never say that, okay? And again, if you want to know the standard of practice, 12.1 at the moment, probably be amended again. But again, we cannot say our services are free or available at no cost. So the rep agreement looks just like a listing agreement because it is. Clients' names, your company name. They're verifying they have no previous buyer rep agreements with anybody else. What's the property to be acquired? Well, you don't know yet, so you got to be kind of broad, but I would not say California because there have been several lawsuits against this because what the attorneys say is, how could you be an expert in all of California? So basically, if I know they're looking at Alameda or Contra Costa counties, that's what I put in. Whatever your broker tells you to do, please feel free to do that. You can put a price in there. You can have specific properties only. I had one client who said to me, I want to buy a house. I said, great. He said, no, I want to buy a house at this location at this address, which is not for sale. I said, well, why? And he said, well, because this is the house I grew up in. And so for months, I bombarded the seller with, I'm serious, my buyer grew up in your home, would love to buy it. Took about 9 months. They finally decided, yeah, we'll sell. Because my buyer offered them a price that made it attractive and they bought it. But We only had one address in there, and you can do that. So totally up to you. Compensation to the broker. This is where you put a percent. And if you charge a transaction fee, again, I don't know that if that's going to hold up anymore. You know, we charge transaction fees and other kinds of fees, but for the moment, there is a box there for that. Or you can charge a flat fee, or you could have a compensation, schedule. Up to $1 million will be this percent, up to 2 million will be that percent, whatever you want to do. I mean, sky's the limit. It's absolutely fine. This explains how the broker gets paid. And are you exclusive or non-exclusive? If you do not check that box, you are non-exclusive, which means your client can have one of these with everybody in this room. And so I'm now competing with every one of you. How much effort am I going to put into this? Not much. I explained to the client, it's better to be exclusive with one agent. Find one you like. If not me, I'm happy to refer you to others, but please be loyal to one. They'll be loyal to you. But again, choose to work any way you want. If you got a lot of pushback initially because they don't understand the form, they're a little uneasy, you may want to start out non-exclusive non-exclusive, and then have it later on. You can have it expire in 30 days. You can say, well, look at it in 30 days or 45 days. Let's see how we like each other. It's up to you how you want to do this. Again, practice this business any way you want. How do we cancel? And this is the problem. Anytime you create agency, you must cancel it. Now, normally agency ends when the subject of the agency is done, which means once it's closed, that's fine. But until the property is closed, your agency hangs out there. And what if you never cancel your agency agreement with them? And they're looking and looking and looking and looking, and something happens. So even if you stop hearing from the client, this never happens to you, but you call them, they don't respond. You email them, you don't respond. You text, they don't respond. Right? Never happens to you. But at least send them a certified letter saying, I hereby cancel my agency relationship with you. And sometimes they'll go, oh, please don't cancel your agency with me. They have no idea what that means, but it's okay. And this is where you start to disclose what is the anticipated payment to the broker. When do you get paid? And then you can actually disclose it on this form. How much are you going to make? Where's it coming from? I want 2.5% in this transaction on this property. The seller is providing 2%, you're paying 0.5%, whatever it works out. This is where you provide transparency. And the same thing here, terms and conditions. And this is where if you wanted to, you can ask the seller, if the seller isn't providing what you would like as compensation, you can ask the seller to provide additional compensation. So again, this form goes along with the purchase agreement. Again, seller is providing this percent. I would like that percent. And again, it's up to the seller if they want to do that. And then again, you just do the math here. Now, so a couple of questions I always get asked. Doesn't the standard of practice, NAR, prohibit me from negotiating my commission after showing during the purchase or after we have an accepted offer? And the answer is no. This is right from NAR. Now, here are some provisions that the courts have ruled or at least have implied are unfair. So I'm recommending you be very careful if you're going to use any of these provisions. Charging unreasonable fees. I don't know what that is, but one of the ones they mentioned was transaction coordination fees. Requiring acceptance of dual agency. The way it currently works is you have a buyer-broker agreement, but it depends on the property. Every purchase agreement, it says at the top, so-and-so is representing the buyer, so-and-so is representing the seller, dual agency or single agency. So a lot of people were saying, regardless of the agency, you will use me. Don't do that. Not explaining resolution of conflicts of interest with other buyers. Because you know that form? Yeah, the one or more agents form, multiple agents form. I mean, so explain if you want to buy a property that I have another client who also wants to buy the same property, how do you deal with that? And just for your information, for me, it's first one, that's it. And then I'll refer them to, you've got to refer them to another company, not within your own company, because it's still dual agency, right? Remember, the agent is the broker, not the individual realtor, right? Oh, and by the way, just since we're on this, I recently had a transaction, so I just happened to be with RE/MAX, but it was another RE/MAX office that had the listing. Totally different DRE number, everything was different. So I just wrote in the addendum, buyer and seller are aware that because we have the same company name, this is not dual agency because we are separately licensed under the state of California Department of Real Estate. So hopefully that'll help. But the courts have still ruled that clients get really confused. If you're with the same company, just let them know. Or you can declare dual agency. It's up to you. All right, so where do we go from here? So I'll just read this to you because this is one of the big players in the lawsuit. These folks were providing support and amicus curiae briefs and everything else. The Community Home Lenders of America. So here's one of the things that we're concerned about, because there are some buyers who cannot pay your commission. Who are they? FHA, VA, right? So this is what the community home lenders sent to all of the regulatory bodies. A shift of the payment of real estate brokerage commissions from home sellers to home buyers could have a profound negative impact on the ability of home buyers to pay for or finance these commissions or those commissions, and on loan appraisal, loan to value calculation and requirements, right? Including VA. Therefore, we urge a coordinated major review of all federal mortgage programs to ensure that every possible step is taken to maintain home buyers' ability to fund and finance the buyer's real estate commission. So they're asking that this be basically waive the policy that the buyers cannot pay any part of their agent's commission. Now, where they get the money from is another issue, but hopefully what they're thinking is they're going to add it into the loan, right? I mean, that's obvious. We also encourage policies which clearly permit down payment assistance programs to pay the cost of the buyer's real estate commission if there is a problem. So this has not been resolved at all. So this is obviously a big issue, but people are aware of it. All right, so once they understand the form, your value, then what do you do? You get their signature on the buyer representation agreement. And if they won't sign the agreement now that they understand it, hallelujah, right? Let me refer you to somebody else. Now, there's some common objections that I've seen, so I've tried to answer them as best as I can. So here's some of my thoughts on these. Can't I go directly to the listing agent? And this is probably going to become more and more common. Now, this is good for me because I'm no longer going to charge a 6% commission. I might get 3 if you list with me, or 3.5, and 4.5 if I also represent the buyer. But not 6. There you go. I've saved you money. Who knows? I explained to them, but they work for the seller. Who's going to protect your interests when it comes to negotiating and disclosures, for example? And I like to explain it this way, that if you go directly to the listing agent, it's like suing somebody and then hiring their attorney to represent you. I mean, but it's a fact of life. I think we're going to see more dual agency. That's just a fact of life. But they've always been able to go directly to the listing agent. And in my experience, it's pretty rare. They usually have their own agent. We'll see what happens. What if the seller isn't paying a commission? I think you will see that I will save you enough money to more than pay for any commission you might have to pay me. I will negotiate hard on your behalf and make sure there aren't any undisclosed problems or other issues. Aren't there agents who won't make me sign an agreement? And again, this is now after July 17th. It'll be required probably. So they won't be able to say that. But what they're going to say is, aren't there agents who won't make me sign an exclusive buyer rep agreement? I'm sure there are, but you don't want to create an agency relationship with more than one agent because you have responsibilities to them, just like we have responsibilities to you. True or not? No, absolutely. Look at the agency form. And if they say, I'm just not comfortable signing an agreement. Now, this is very important to understand. The risk of real estate has now been shifted to buyer's agents. And let me show you why, because there's only one answer to this. And this is what I tell clients. I will never let a commission stand in the way of you getting the home of your dreams. Which means if they're not paying what I'm comfortable with, I'm still going to accept it. But you see where the risk lies now? We didn't have that risk before. So this is all new. It's all different. It's all changing and all in flux. So questions that you might have, and afterwards, if you have other questions, just email me, michaelsoonlee@gmail.com. But what have I not covered? Go. So the question is, after July 17th, and again, we're assuming that the courts will accept the proposed settlement by NAR, that the Department of Justice will go along with it, which I have my doubts. But if the buyer doesn't sign a required buyer representation agreement, who's going to enforce it and all of that? No one's quite sure at this point in time, but I suspect it'll come down to the local level, right? It'll be State of California Department of Real Estate or something. But there's lots of questions that cannot be answered at this point in time. I wish if I had a crystal ball, I'd be retired. I'd be on the ship all the time floating around and but keep an eye on that. It's a good question. There's just no one, including NAR, CAR, has an answer to that yet. But there are plans for FAQs to answer some of these questions shortly from both NAR and CAR, and they're going to keep coming. So it's important to each one of us that we stay on top of this. It's not their responsibility, it's our responsibility, because again, you see what kind of information is being fed to your clients, sellers and buyers. And so we need to know what's being said. We have to know how to answer it. And so if you look at my objections book, what I did was when I got started early in this business, I had all of these objections that people were asking me. What if my Uncle Bob will, they'll sell the property or buy me a property at a lower price? I mean, I went around and I asked people, how do you answer this question? Okay.
So if we're, as representing a buyer, has to create this relationship and have the buyer broker agreement signed as part of our commitment to work with this client. If the buyer goes to the seller agent direct.
So if the buyer goes to the
If they go to the listing agent.
if the buyer goes to the listing agent directly,
They not obligated also then to sign a buyer broker agreement.
it looks like the listing agent is also going to have to sign a buyer broker because
Sign it with somebody.
with somebody, that's a great point, right?
So
You're going to have to sign it with somebody. How about somebody who doesn't have a conflict of interest? Right?
That's gonna, because, okay.
Yeah.
What are, after July, what are the implications if you're a listing agent, a selling, listing agent, a buyer, a real estate agent comes in that doesn't even know about this? There's a lot of agents that are not gonna know about this. What's the liability for the seller of the listing agent?
So what's the liability for the listing agent or the selling agent if there's a client that doesn't do this because they don't know or the agent does not know? And unfortunately, I mean, you are the cream of the crop, the elite, because you take classes. If you look at how many members we have here at SCORE and how few are in this room or on Zoom, it's sad. And so you're going to have to practice this profession at the highest level you possibly can. And when I started out, I had to help other agents write offers on my listings, other things like that. It's just going to be challenging for us. But I guarantee you there's going to be less agents to deal with a year from now. You're seeing the drop off already. It will continue. But again, if you can survive and weather this storm, you're going to come out the end like we did in 1980, like in 2005, with a lot less competition and a lot more business. But just hang in there. Okay? All right. Well, SCORE, I want to thank you so much for being here. If I can help you again, michaelsoonlee@gmail.com. Thank you so much. Best of luck to you. Thank you. Any questions? Come on up.